In the Mishnah of Aaron Kotler, Zeichat Tzadik Levracha, he tells us a tremendous insight that we certainly need to hear in all times, Kal v'chomer, in the times that we're living in now. The Mishnah of Aaron explains that the Rebbeinu Shalom made a part of the Teva, the nature of the world, that even in situations, he brings Rayas, Kederech of Aaron's Levracha, that even in situations where the Midas HaRachamim of the Rebbeinu Shalom would not allow for a person to be Zeiche to certain Shefa and Atzlacha and Parnasa and Bracha and health and Gezint and all things, even from the Midas HaRachamim, in situations where he wouldn't be able to be Zeiche to those things, the Rebbeinu Shalom created that the Teva of the world is that Tefillah has the ability to supersede that. And Tefillah has the ability to open up Sinoiris of Shefa, says Rav Aaron, that even when a person would not be right through the Midas HaRachamim, that the Tefillah itself would just be able to be open. Rav Aaron Kedarkai, Rav Aaron brings Rayas from the Gemara Kedushin. Other places he brings a Raya from Moshe Rabbeinu, Milanu Gadol mi Moshe Rabbeinu, who had more mice and toivim say Chazal than Moshe Rabbeinu. But Moshe Rabbeinu was only nene, not mikoyach is mice and toivim. But that the only way Moshe Rabbeinu would have been nene was al yedei his tefillah. Says Rav Aaron, you see that tefillah is something that has the ability to break the rules of the Midas Adin and the rules of the Midas HaRachamim, and to open up Tzinoiris of Shefa that we so desperately need in these times to be opened. And what greater way for us to open up that those Tzinoiris of Shefa, that al yedei learning the sugya of tefillah be'iyin. When we learn the sugya of tefillah, it will give us a greater appreciation for tefillah. And it's not enough to just know the countless chazal that talk about the chshivas of tefillah and the unbelievable koyach of tefillah. It's also important for us to learn it be'iyin, that it becomes a part of us. Especially, we'll see soon a shaila, which is mamish, lo yaleinu rachman litzlan, but it's negeya, shaila that I received about someone that suffered with corona, and he had to go on a respirator. Baruch Hashem, he's now doing much better, Baruch Hashem. But one of the aftermath of this terrible trauma, the trauma to his respiratory system and to his lungs in general and to his throat and to his vocal cords, is that the doctor told him that when he comes off of the respirator, when he came off of the respirator, Be'ezus Hashem, Baruch Hashem, he came off of the respirator, he was told by the doctor that he's not allowed to talk for a week for sure, like 2 weeks. I'm under the impression that a lot of people that suffered from laryngitis are sometimes told the same thing. They're not allowed to talk. The doctor in this case told him he's not allowed to talk, he's not allowed to whisper, and he told him actually whispering is worse. And he told him that if he whispers or talks or anything, so then he's running the risk of losing his vocal cords forever, which is something that certainly a Yid, after he comes out of such a situation, wants to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom, he wants to daven to the Bashefer and thank the Rebbeinu Shalom, and he wants to daven 3 times a day. He wasn't able to daven for the last week, 2 weeks, and he wants to know what's his din. Avada l'chayr, he has to listen to the doctor, which we'll talk about in a moment. But is there any eitzah for such a person who's unable to daven, he's unable to talk, he's unable to whisper? What could be the eitzah for such a yid? Certainly learning these sugyas be'iyin, number one, should be a shmira for us, that the etzim limud will be Yarchei Zayin with the limud of these halachas, that we shouldn't come to such a shaila, number one. And number two, the learning of a sugya be'iyin gives us an appreciation of the tefillah itself, the milas of the tefillah. But just to mention a few places where we find in Chazal certain chshivas of tefillah, especially in these times, that we need to have more of an appreciation and more of an understanding of the value of our tefillah, of the severity of our tefillah. The Gemara in Tainis and Dafit Chesam and Aleph, such an important Gemara that we need to hear. Tanya Reb Meir Oimer, Shnayim Oilin Lamita. The Chalyan Shavi, you can have 2 people that go to the same sickness, and they both went on the same mita, they have the same exact level of sickness. The King Shnaim Sha'olim, the garden, says the Gemara, Zed Nitzel, V'zel Loi Nitzel. In fact, the Gemara, why this one was Nitzel, this one wasn't Nitzel. Says the Gemara, Zeh Spalel V'nene. They both daven, they both had the same sickness. Why this one was answered and this one was not? Says the Gemara, with kavana. We have no understanding of the cheshbonis of the Bashefer, but certainly we have to do our ishtadlis. And Chazal are teaching us over here that this one was saved and this one was not, because this one davin a tefillah with kavana. Avada our tefillah, when we learn the sunnah be'in and understand what we do, we'll have more of a connection to the tefillah, we'll have more of an appreciation for the tefillah. And just to mention a few places where you find in Chazal such beautiful chizukim, such what Chazal talk about tefillah. Says, you think when Moshe Rabbeinu, when he raised his hands, that's what Klal Yisrael would save by the hands of Moshe Rabbeinu? Says the Gemara, when they would be mishabed their leiv l'shamayim, misrapim, says the Gemara, v'im lav hayuni moikin. So we know when we're mishabed our leiv. And the Gemara says, also Gemara in Brachos and Davav, in these days, most of us, if not all of us, we're davening at home. Says the Gemara, you want success in your tefillah? Kallah mokem l'tefillah elokei Avram be'ezra. Avram Avinu's Eibishter, he'll help you. So we have to be kaveh our place. We have to have a mokem kavua when it comes to tefillah. And the Gemara, famous Gemara Brachos, Daf Tesam and Beis, the Gemara tells us many of us, we're davening at home, we're davening without a minyan. So the Gemara says, no, if you're not able to daven a minyan, but you can daven basikin, not everybody's able to daven basikin. Sometimes these days are difficult. If we could sleep, it's better for us to sleep sometimes. But those that are Zaycha, Amar Yechanan, Vasikin, how you going when they say Manates? And those people, says the Gemara, Amalei, Rabbalah, Leahula, Ki Ailas Lahasan, go and see Rabruna, because he's an Adam Gadol, a Sameach, the mitzvahs, Zimna Chadei, Samach Gula Tvila, and these days, we need to smile the whole day. If you daven Vasikin and you say Magula Tvila, that's how the Farshim explained the Gemara over here, then you'll be Zeicha to have a smile in your face the whole entire day. The Gemara also says, these days we need chizik. The Rebbeinu Shalom should help us, that we shouldn't be genizik, we shouldn't be damaged the entire day. Davening Vasikin, that would certainly help us to have such a protection. And also in these days, we have to hear what the Gemara in Brachos and David Beis says. The Gemara says, Amar Rabba Barchin in the Saba Mishmei the Rav, Kol she'efshel levakish ruachanim al chaveiroi. Daven for someone else. If we're Baruch Hashem healthy, daven for somebody else. If he's not, he's nikra chayte. And the Gemara says over here, Shekach Hareid. A person says, a Talmid Chacham, if a Talmid Chacham is sick, Amar Rava, Sarach sheyech le'atzmai alav. If a Talmid Chacham is sick, a person has to make him sick from davening. In these days, later, Rachmana litzlan, there's many skenim and tzaddikim and Talmid Chachamim that they're sick. We have to daven for them. I was told that when Reb Schneier, Zechron Levracha, when he was sick, Reb Yankov went into Lakewood, and Reb Yankov gave a shmooze, and he said this Gemara, and he said, when the Talmidei Chachamim that are sick, we have to make ourselves sick for the Talmidei Chachamim. He started to mamish, to cry, a geveint, betrerin, and they daven for Reb Schneier, because when the Talmidei Chacham is sick, we have to make ourselves sick for a Talmidei Chacham. And the Gemara says, Yerushalmi Makis, Yerushalmi says, the koyach of tefillah, ad kidigar, that the mothers of the Kehanim had to daven. The mothers of the Kehanim Gedolim had to daven because one person in an Ir Miklat, he's going to want to have enough. We're sitting over here in Bidud, as it's called in Eretz Yisrael, in quarantine over here. We're stuck in our homes for the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. We want out already. So this person in the Ir Miklat, Halavai would be able to go now and hang around in the Ir Miklat. But he's in the Ir Miklat and he had enough. So what does he do? He davens that the Kohen Gadol should die. Such a Russia. The whole Klal Yisrael needs the Kohen Gadol. He goes in the Fnai and he davens for us and he does the avodah for us. But there's one Russia who he had enough, he wants out. So he davens that the Gadol Ador should die. And the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to listen because it's a heartfelt tefillah. So much so, the mothers of the Kohanim Gedolim, they have to daven. So they have to do eitzes to give the food and the epis, the zachin to the people in their mikvah to make them happy that they shouldn't daven that their son dies. Such is the koyach of tefillah, the ra. Can you imagine what the koyach of tefillah is? The toiv, like Chazal teach us. The Gemara Brachos Davav. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Chanan afilu the Bal Chaloimis tells the person, tomorrow you will die. The Macher Umeis al yimne atzmoi min harachma. The Yispalel, says the Gemara. Gemara brings the Gemara. It's Chizkiah Melech. Daven. Don't listen if the doctor is telling you this person is not going to make it. Don't listen. The roife was given reshus to give refuah, but he was not given reshus to give up. So therefore we daven. And the Gemara says, Gemara says, famous Gemara, Dafamid Beis, Kallah marich b'tefilasa. If he's marich in the tefillah, now we have time to be marich in the tefillah. Ein tefilasa chizer reikam. We learned that from Moshe. The Gemara says, if we're marich in that tefillah, it will be answered. It doesn't go back empty-handed. The Gemara says also over there, if you see it's not working, Yarchei yispalel kavel Hashem, Hashem, and this chelik at least, with the tefillah, what the Gemara brings the tefillah, Yerushalmi and Brachas brings down. Yerushalmi says, Lo'ilam, lo yeh, pasuk hazeh, person should never get away from your mouth these words. Hashem tzvakis, imanim eskav lanu l'Yaakov Selah. And the Gemara says, Ashrei Hashem tzvakis, Ashrei Adam dechbach. Says the Gemara. Reb Chizkiah b'shem Rabba, Yehi ratzon lefanecha Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosseinu. This should be the tefillah in our mouth these days. Shetatzilenu mishoyes achatzufos, hakoshois, haroyes, hayotzos, and hamitzvachis lovoi le'olam. But our sugya today, the sugya of Shulchan Aruch Siman Kuf Aleph Siv Beis, the sugya of davening and the volume of how loud we're supposed to be davening. We're supposed to be davening b'koil. Are we supposed to hear what we're saying? And what this person, Laida, the situation that we spoke about, he's not going to be allowed to be moitzi any koil. Is there a way to daven? Maybe just by mouthing the words, or maybe not. He should just think the words, or maybe there is no way to for him, or maybe somebody else should be moitzi him. That's our sugya of today. That's a different maimer of Chazal. That's a Chazal that the Gemara brings down, famous brachas. Gemara says, "Hamashmiya koila betfilasai." A person that davens out loud, hareza miktani amuna. Person that davens out loud, you're felt in amuna. You're lacking in amuna. Why? Because Yerushalmi says at the end of brachas, and every child has to know this. Every adult already does know this. That we know that the world, to get to the Kisei HaKavod, to get all the way up to the Kisei HaKavod, is millions and millions of miles. I have the Yerushalmi Heart Scroll. He makes the cheshbon on the bottom, the amount of years it would take to a person to travel from here all the way to the Kisei HaKavod. Millions and millions of years it would take a person to get from the bottom all the way to the top of the Kisei HaKavod. But when a kleine kind says the words Hashem, Smosai Tiftach Ufi Yogi Dilasecha, he does the words Hashem, open my mouth so that I can tell you the praise of the Rebbeinu Shalom. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes his ear, Pela Oizen, my mouth. I transcend all of those rakiyas and the Rebbeinu Shalom's ears right by my mouth. So I was like, why are you screaming in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ear? Must be your Ketani Amunah. You don't believe that the Rebbeinu Shalom listens to tefillah. So therefore, we're not supposed to daven out loud. Hamashmiya Kol is a Ketani Amunah, and it's also a Navi Sheker. The Gemara says, however, which we'll see soon, the Chana, we learned from Chana that you're not supposed to maybe daven out loud. Koila lo yishama, it says by Chana. But epis belachash, yes, there's supposed to be something, and that's a mitzvah Hashem, that's a sugya of today. That's a sugya of today, and the mitzvah Hashem with this will be able to try to come to an answer for this Yid, Tyre Yid that wants to know what to do. The Shulchan Aruch over here says, Siv Beis, Kuf Aleph, Siv Beis, lo yispalel b'liboy levad. A person shouldn't daven in his heart, because we paskin, hear her, is lam kediבור dami. Thought is not enough, so don't daven in your heart. Has to daven with his mouth. You have to mouth the words. Not only do you have to have the words come out of your mouth, but you have to hear them with your ears. It should be low, like we just said, because you don't want to be a Ketani Amona. It shouldn't be a matziv where other people can hear. However, if a person's in a matziv where he has no choice but to daven out loud because he can't concentrate without davening out loud. So then that supersedes that which you're not supposed to have a matziv where other people are hearing your davening. The truth is that the Zohar already brings down, it's very dangerous that somebody else should hear your davening. Because the Zohar brings down that the way it works, the Zohar brings the Zohar, but the Zohar brings that when a person hears your davening, that the Rebbeinu Shalom Kivyachol says, okay, somebody else heard it. Kivyachol, that tefillah doesn't get brought up to Shemayim Kivyachol, even though we said Pela Oizen, but that's only a comment that there's nobody else being involved in the conversation between me and the Heilig Bashefer. But rather somebody else is involved in the conversation and somebody else hears the words of my tefillah, so then already that's a problem. However, the din that a person has to be able to be kaven is more important, so if you can't be makaven, avada, it doesn't need to bother other people. Where this is negeya, sometimes in the house. In the haim, it's hard to daven in the house sometimes. So sometimes a person has to daven out loud. So in such a case, we tell him, if you need to do it in order to have kavanah, so then it's mutter. But a normal lechatchila situation is that you're supposed to daven loud enough, says the Shulchan Aruch, that your ears can hear it and that somebody else's can't. That's the normal way a person is supposed to daven. And that says the Shulchan Aruch goes on, avada in a tzibur, you can't bother other people. The Ramah brings down that in a house, when a person wants to daven out loud so that his family can get a limud of how to daven, they'll hear him davening, they'll now know how to daven. So that's a tzarich of the tefillah. So therefore it is mutter. There's a tshuva from the Goyim of Moshe in Gimel Vav. He talks about Ashul, where the people there, they were Amaratzim, and they didn't know how to daven. So there was a shaila exactly what should they do. So Moshe brings this Shulchan Aruch, he brings this Ramah. He says if they're able that the Chazan should daven out loud and they'll just say Balachash together with the Chazan, then good. If not, says Moshe, what could you do? The Chazan will daven out loud. He brings our halacha that if you're doing it to help other people, so then it's allowed. You'll daven out loud, the Chazan will daven out loud, and they'll daven out loud with him. But the lechatchila normal situation is that you daven shmud esrei out of your mouth, just loud enough that your ears can hear and that other people's ears can't hear. And that's stated in Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch goes on, talks about maybe Rosh Hashanah. People do things for kavanah in those days, even the tzibur. Okay, the yesod of Avada is never to bother another yid. Avada, it's hard to have siyata d'shmaya when the other yid is listening to your shmona esrei and davening against you. But upon him, certainly the normal situation, the person is supposed to daven out loud enough that his ears hear and that nobody else hears. That's the law. Now, our case over here, comes again the Mishnah Berurah over here in Tzivkot and Hay, and the Mishnah Berurah says, you should know there's a Zohar. And the Zohar seems to say that you shouldn't mishmiyat la'oznai. You shouldn't get the words out of your mouth loud enough that even your ears should hear. Why not? Because it's avodah shebalei, the Zohar says. And it should be only you. Even your own ears shouldn't hear. Only the Rebbeinu Shalom should hear. Nobody else. The Rebbeinu Shalom is the Yodei HaMachshavos. So only the Rebbeinu Shalom should hear the words of Tefillah. And somebody else shouldn't hear it, but even your own ears shouldn't hear it. That's the Zohar. Says the Mishnah Berurah, but the Magen Avraham learns not like that. The Magen Avraham says that's not pshat in the Zohar. He says, Aval, you should know Rabbi say in the Mishnah Berurah, that's a psak I once heard from Rishaim B'Zichron Levacha. Aval, the Magen Avraham, no raya from the Zohar. And the Goyin says that the Shulchan Aruch is correct, and the Zohar agrees, and that you're supposed to hear the words that come out of your mouth. That, of course, for this person, he's not in a position that he's able to do that. That's no shaila. But we'll see if it's Hashem. Is there any eitzah for him, Al-Kapanim, that he could daven, even if the words won't come out? That's clear that you're yotzei davening if you're not hearing the words that you're davening in Shemona Esrei. The only question is the lichatchila. So this person certainly can't do the lichatchila. Our question is, what does he do b'klal? Because he can't even whisper. Certainly he can't hear the words, but that we said for sure yotzei b'di evan. Al-Kapanim, in a situation where he's not even allowed to whisper, are there any eitzahs for this person? So, the Mishnah Berurah over here, he tells us very strong words. He says, what's the reason why you're yotzei if you didn't hear the words in your ears? He says, Mikol Makam, Afilu L'Ozav Le'Shmiya, you're still yotzei. Kevan Shemikol Makam Hoitzi B'Svasav. You have the words come out of your mouth. So it seems to be that if the words aren't coming out of your mouth, the Mishnah Berurah seems to say you're not yotzei. Those are the simple reading of the Mishnah Berurah. Hoil v'hoitzi b'svasav. Says the Mishnah Berurah in the Bir Halacha, Big Ariches, he proves over here that a hearer is lav kediבור dami, and if the words don't come out, the Mishnah Berurah brings the lashon of the Magen Avraham that the hevel that comes out of the mouth is ma'orer, the coil that comes out of your mouth is ma'orer, very stark in Shemayim. And he brings over here, the Mishnah Berurah, go and look in the Nefesh HaChaim. The Nefesh HaChaim, actually, if you look in the Nefesh HaChaim, it's a little difficult to find. Mishnah Berurah tells you it's in Perek Hay. It's if you go to the back of Shar Gimel, after Shar Gimel, it's the Perek Hay after Shar Gimel. Over there, the Nefesh HaChaim, Chaim V'Lajin, he brings down that borer, it's not just an Indian of lichatchila. He says it's ma'akev b'di eved in here the tavis of tefillah b'leif. If you didn't daven the words out of your mouth and all you did is you were maharid in your leif, lo yotza chayves tefillah klal. He brings the Magen Avraham. He says the Magen Avraham is a rather right. He says v'madayim loyaver. And if it's not, let's say it's 9 o'clock and his man tefillah is still time to daven, you should daven again. You have to say every word again. And if you didn't daven again, you have to daven 2 times. You have to make up a tefillas tashlumin. He brings down the Magen Avraham, and he brings down al pi Kabbalah, B'Zohar, Kitzvah Arizal, things that I obviously don't understand. Tikkun Lamis that come out of the hevel that comes out, the ruchoi, and it's ayin sham lamavinu. Akopanim, but it seems to be a davar bara that this person who asked us to shaila, there's no eitzah. Elamai, you'll say, so what? You should daven? Avada not. If we know that Chazal tell us that you have to give up for a mitzvah to say up until a chaimish, the Mishnah Berurah brings down in Tafresh and Vav, maybe up until Meiser of your nechasim, but you certainly don't have to give up more than 20% of your nechasim for a mitzvah to say. So davening, it's true in these days, it's an Eitz Sarah, and the Ramban who holds that davening is the Rabbanan agrees that in these days davening is deraisa. Sure, because taka it's an ace tzara, but al kapanim, it's no more than a mitzvah to say. And for a mitzvah to say, you're not mechuyev to give up more than 20% of your value, of your nechasim. I think most people, their voice for the rest of their life is worth more than 20% of their nechasim. So a sekonis aver, certainly a person would not have to give it up. And certainly, assuming the doctor is correct, he would be allowed to listen to the doctor. But this yid is telling me, okay, I have to listen to the doctor, but give me an eitzah. I want to daven. You want to tell the yid he's potter from davening? You tell me I'm potter from life too. What does the Gemara say in Baba Kama? Ma vizu adam. The Gemara says a woman is chayiv in davening. So Shaila, how much is chayiv? But the Gemara says pshita. It's rachmi. A woman doesn't need rachmi. She's not nishkin leben. She's not oifen da sein leben. She oifen da leben. So I say, what's the difference in lady? What's the difference in man? And this yid is telling me, okay, you tell me I'm potter. Amada, fine. I don't have to give up all my money. Versteht sich? Aber was kann der Yid ist das Teamtake? Ich bin ein Yid. Ich will davenin. Rachmi. I want to daven. So what can we tell such a Yid? So the Chashav Oilam saw the Rav Shlomo Zalman is brought down in the Alicha Shloima. So more ridiculous, riesige Chiddush. Riesige Chiddush. What's the Chiddush from the, excuse me. What's the Chiddush of the Shlomo Zalman Auerbach? It's brought down in Sefer Pitzcha Aloche, Perek Zayin, Alocha Yud, that they asked a similar case to Shlomo Zalman about a Yid that had laryngitis. They wanted to know, what do? I can't daven. The doctors told me I can't daven. So first, Shlomo Zalman says you have to be mevar if it's 100%. Maybe he's not. They're just saying that, etc. But let's say it's 100%, and they say to whisper is even worse. So then he hates. So Shlomo Zalman over there, he writes these words. He says, "In bar loisha roife amitis, if the pekudas haroife is true, so yaharer, he should think the davening. V'chatich b'svasav, and then he should be chaytich the words with his mouth. He should say the words without any voice, without even whispering, but he should mouth the words." They bring down over there, Kisvei Talmidim. This is from the Kisvei Talmidim. And then they bring down also on the bottom over there, in the Sefer, from a Sefer Pitzchei Halacha, in Perek Aleph, in the 21st Ha'ara, that he says these words, Misha Mevarich B'svasav, someone that, over there he's talking about brachas, tefillah, it's all the same halacha. Misha Mevarich B'svasav, Aval Ein Kol Yotzei Klal. He's using his lips, he's using his mouth, but not a sound is coming out. Im nechshav zel lehira. Is this called hira? Is this called dibur? Hoira, Rabbeinu was paskin. Shezet dibur mamish. This is mamish dibur. Unbelievable chiddush. First of all, before we go weiter, Shlomo Zalman just said the answer. Shlomo Zalman said, now the truth is, you look over there, and Shlomo Zalman said a few things. He said, first of all, maybe somebody else should be moitzi you, which we'll talk about in a moment. While he's being moitzi you, you should be thinking every word, okay? And number three, you should be saying the actual words. You should be chaytich b'svasav. You're supposed to be mouthing the words. So Shlomo Zalman, is he saying a kula or a chumrah? So to that person, he gave him a lot of eitzes. Somebody should be moitzi you, and maybe that's a problem. So you should be thinking it, and maybe that's a problem. So you should also be mouthing the words. But let's say the Shlomo Zalman seems to say that mouthing the words is a deeper mamish. Is that itself a kula or a chumrah? So the truth is, it's an unbelievable chumrah. For this person, maybe it's a kula because it enables him to daven. But for everybody else, it's an incredible chumrah. Why? Somebody's sitting, let's say, in the middle of Kriya Shema. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but somebody's in the middle of Kriya Shema. It's actually wrong. But let's say somebody's sitting in the middle of Kriya Shema, and somebody comes over to him, and he wants to mouth to him something. He doesn't want to talk to him because in the middle of Kriya Shema. The truth is, the Gemara Yuma says, in Sport Lalach, you're not supposed to stop in the middle of Kriya Shema. Okay, but he starts mouthing to the person something. And he thinks, I didn't stop, I'm just mouthing to the person. According to Shlomo Zalman, that's Dibur Mamish. According to Shlomo Zalman, is not saying over here a kula. Shlomo Zalman is saying an incredible chumrah, derech agav. But let's dive on the etzim Dibur of Shlomo Zalman. Is this true? I mean, Shlomo Zalman, the nit rishos l'dun, to dan with Shlomo Zalman. It says here it's from the Kisvei Talmidim. So let's dive at least in the chiddush of that which was brought from the Kisvei Talmidim of Shlomo Zalman. Didn't hear it straight from Shlomo Zalman's mouth, so it gives us just to dan on the words. This is a very big chiddush, Shlomo Zalman is saying, that if you're mouthing the words, that's a dibur mamish. On the bottom, they bring a makor. What's the makor? The makor is from Chana, because by Chana it says, Rak sfaseh nois, which we learn out the makor of davening in Shemona Esrei. All you saw was her lips, the Kallah leishama, and you don't hear a voice. So they say that was the Makor of Shlomo Zalman, that it's enough just what? Just to mouth the words, and that's called the Dibur Mamash. Now, I say this is an incredible chiddush. Incredible chiddush. Let me tell you why. First of all, we know all over the place that the Paiskim dan about a Cherish who's an Eina Medaber and an Eina Shemeya. He can't hear and he can't speak, and he has a din of a shaitan. All Hilchos Torah, that's a separate sugya. A person that's a Cherish is an Eina Shemeya, and he's an Eina Medaber. Now, l'chayra, we can ask a question. A Cherish that is Eina Shemeya and Eina Medaber. Why can't the Cherish just move his lips? There's no metzias l'chayra of a Cherish that can. I can understand the Cherish that can't hear, and I can understand the Cherish that can't be moitzi whisper. But why could you have a case? Why should the Cherish not be able to mouth the words? And then he would be considered a Cherish ha Eina Shemeya u'medaber. According to Shlomo Zalman, it's Dibur Mamash. So what are you going to say? You're going to say no, because since he was born like that, so he was never able to pick it up, so he doesn't know how to mouth the words. Okay, valid. But there's a Mincha Shleima. Who's the Mincha Shleima? Rabbi Yisai. Shlomo Zalman Orbach. Mincha Shleima in the 34th Chuvah in Lamed Dalet over there, Shlomo Zalman dons on a very big nidin that all the Achreinim donned on about Leider Chmanim L'Slam L'Aleinu, a person that gets old and he loses his koyach ha-shmiya and his koyach ha-dibur. He loses both of those koyches. And there's a very famous nidon in the Achreinim. Does he now have a din of a Rahman al-Islam of a shait of a cherish, ain't a shait, ain't a medaber, ain't a shemeya? Or no, do you say that since Lamaisi he has the seichel, he's just missing the utensils of the communication, so he doesn't have such a din? Shlomo Zalman goes back and forth and he's done with it. Over there, Shlomo Zalman's only need is that once he loses his ability to hear and loses his ability to speak, says Shlomo Zalman, that such a person is now only able to communicate. So the fact that you're able to communicate doesn't make it deeper. Shlomo Zalman says that in the first. It doesn't make it deeper because you're able to communicate. Shlomo Zalman says it's no different than writing on a piece of paper a message. Shlomo Zalman says we need to have the ability of real deeper. A person that's an old man that loses his hearing and loses his ability to speak. I've never heard of some metzias that he also loses his ability to not mouth the words. Shlomo Zalman is not talking just about a person that has stroke. He's talking about any person that lost his ability to hear and lost his ability to speak. But according to Shlomo Zalman, when you mouth the words, that's Dibur Mamash. Sarchi Gadol, the Kisvei Talmidim doesn't stem with what Shlomo Zalman with his own pen wrote. It's in Chiddush of Shlomo Zalman is Mamash an incredible Chiddush. In the Kaf Chaim in Ar Siman, he brings down from Rav Chaim Vital, he says that you must be Mevate Umechatech B'Svasayim Heitiv. When you daven, you must mouth the words Heitiv, Vehevel Ayoytzei Min Hapeh. The breath that comes out, which is obviously a reference to the whisper, the words that come out, the Eloi, because if you don't do that, Eloi Nikra Deeper. The Lashon of the Magen Avram, Hakol Me'oyer L'Nala. And without that, it's a Chesaron in Deeper, says the Magen Avram. And the Mishabura's Lashon is Kol She'ena Moitzi B'Svasav. It's not Yotzei. Mishabura sounds you have to be Moitzi B'Svasav. Mishabura doesn't just say the words Akimas Vasayin, which is the Lashon of moving the lips. He says you have to be moitzi b'svasav. And if you're not moitzi b'svasav, it sounds like you're not yotzei. Deloika Gina Gadol, Shlomo Zalman, they bring a raya. Over there they say the raya is from Tanakh, the raya from Chana. The truth is, it's really a big pella. Because if you look in the Mefarshim, the Radak, and the Mefarshim on Tanakh, on the pasuk where it talks about Chana, it says, the koil lo yishama, the Russian, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the attack himself. A lot of Russian attacks say it looked like she was davening, she wasn't speaking. It looks like no words were coming out. But Avada, there was a call. What are they coming lafuke? They're coming to say she was coming to daven. She was trying to be Yarchei davening. And if you don't daven with words coming out, albeit a whisper, but if you don't daven with words coming out, so then you're not Yarchei. It sounds like not like this. I saw in the Sefer Medrash Shmuel's on Perkei Avos. He goes on the Memches Kinyonei Torah. And in the Memches Kinyonei Torah, one of them is the Lashon Arichas Vasayim. Arichas Vasayim. What's Arichas Vasayim? So the Medrash Shmuel, he writes like this, very interesting way. He says, sometimes a person, he says, you have to learn with words. Because like the Gemara in Eruvin says, if you don't say the words, you're going to forget. Okay. But it says, what are you going to do? Sometimes you're sitting in the base Medrash, and you're gonna start learning out loud. It's gonna bother. Sometimes you sit in the basement. The guy next to you thinks he's Mordechai ben Shweki over here, singing away and doesn't clapping away, and you're not able to learn. You're davening, you're learning, and you're not able to learn because you can't concentrate. So he says, what are you gonna do? You don't want to bother somebody else. So he says, you know what you should do, because you need to have arichas v'sayim. Says the Medrash Shmuel. He says you can't do b'kol rav. So what do? You have to do arichas v'sayim. Kloimar bilachash. Bilachash. Says you learn bilachash. Like, says the Medrash Shmuel, like it says by Chana. Just like it says by Chana, that all she did was she said the words bilachash. That's how you have to learn when you're going to bother somebody else. But what do you see? You see clear, how did he learn Chana? That Chana was moitzi the words from her bed, didn't just mouth the words. So this is a big pella on Rabbeinu Gadol Shlomo Zalman. So I did what you're supposed to do. I asked the author of the Sefer, Alicha Shleima, I said to him, what's the pshat in this? It's a very big chiddush. He says, yeah, it's a chiddush. He says, but if you look, it says Kisvei Talmidim. So maybe the pshat is that this is what Rav Shlomo Zalman said in the Shir, as it's sad. It's sad. And not only that, if anything, if you look at Rav Shlomo Zalman, he's really coming to say a chumrah. He's coming to say, tell somebody else to be mitzi you, and naharer, and mouth the words. And, kulei hay v'ulai. So maybe Rav Shlomo Zalman wasn't saying it halacha l'maisa, but to say it halacha l'maisa and to give this as the eitzah to this yid l'chayra is very difficult. Still tzarchi, he brings the sefer there, Piskei halacha, that Rav Shlomo Zalman said is diber mamish, and that is mamish and tzarchi and gadol. But let's go weiter. Let's go weiter. Chayra, what should we tell this yid to do? So maybe we'll tell this yid that somebody else should be mitzi him. Now, if it was simple, and he can go to shul, and he can get a minyan, he could tell the chazan to be mitzi him, and then things would be simple. However, obviously today, unfortunately, like we can't daven in a minyan, and we can't daven with 10 other people. So what's the halacha? And this person, anyways, is not going to shul anytime soon. So what's the halacha? Could somebody be mitzi me in Shmoneh Esrei? You wonder why can't somebody be mitzi me in Shmoneh Esrei? So the truth is, in Shulchan Aruch and Tavkuf Tzadi Dalet, it's two shitas. The first shita, and the Mishmur says that's the Ikar shita, holds that a person can't be mitzi someone else, Shemeh Ka'oineh and Shmoneh Esrei. Only time somebody can be mitzi me in Shmoneh Esrei is a chazan. And even that, we say today, you shouldn't be Yarchei with the chazan if you're a baki. And the Mishmur brings a case in Kufchav Dalid that even if it's a case of where you forgot Yalav Yavai and you are Yarchei with the chazan, the Mishmur says don't do it, because to be Yarchei with the chazan and to remember to concentrate on every single word and every single Hashem and every single baruch, it's very difficult. Like upon him, Lalacha, the only time says the first sheet in Tavkuf Tzadi Dalid is Hilchos Rosh Hashanah. Those days, Rabbi say, it's very negaya. A person didn't have a machzer, didn't have a sitter. He didn't know the davening. So he needed somebody else to be mitzi him in the davening. Says a person allowed to be mitzi somebody else in Shmoneh Esrei. So the Shulchan Aruch first shita is that you're not allowed to have somebody else be mitzi Shemeh Ka'oineh in Shmoneh Esrei. The second shita, Shulchan Aruch brings yesh cholkim. Yesh cholkim. I guess the idea is each person on his own. Okay. But yesh cholkim, it says that no, somebody could be mitzi you. Okay, how do we paskin? So it's interesting. In Shulchan Aruch, in Kufchav Dalid, when he discusses the sugya, doesn't even bring down the shita that holds that you could be mitzi your friend Shemeh Ka'oineh with Shmoneh Esrei. He only brings down the shita that you cannot be mitzi your friend in Shmoneh Esrei Shemeh Ka'oineh. It sounds like the Mishmur holds that's the ikar shita, which would mean that in our case over here, l'chayra, that's not an eitzah to tell, let's say, his son happens to have him in his house now because he's a chayli, he brings him into his house. It's not an eitzah for him to be mitzi his son. That which he's davening out loud, no, that wouldn't bother us because that halacha will be mevater on in order to help out this other yid. But upon him to daven out loud and to be mitzi him, you're not doing anything according to the first shita. But the truth is, the Aruch HaShulchan says over there that b'shas atchak you could be maker. So that would be the eitzah over here, that he'll daven out loud and he'll be mitzi his friend in Shmoneh Esrei. In this case, he'll be mitzi his father in Shmoneh Esrei. No. The only thing is that very interesting. I saw in the Torah's Chaim in Siman Samach Beis, Torah's Chaim says it's not mistaber that the Torah Chazal were mechayev a person in a mitzvah that the only way you can do that mitzvah is al yedei somebody else. Very interesting svara. That the Torah wasn't mechayev you, kiddush, I can be yotzei with somebody else because I can do kiddush. But it's not established that if you're in a matzav where you can't be mekayim kiddush, Shemona Esrei, and that the only way that you could be mekayim Shemona Esrei is al yedei listening to somebody else, that you should have a chiyuv b'chlal. Interesting idea. Okay, maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. But lo yoyel lo yazik, what do you lose? Let the son be mitzi the father. What do you lose? It's not so simple, the Rabbi say, because to listen to every word, especially when a person's a chayla, is very, very difficult. Right? It's very, very difficult. So I want to tell you something interesting. The chayra, there's a big pella to everything we spoke about today. The HaRav already discussed this shayla in Siman Tzadi Dalet. Ramah says, l'chayra our case. Ramah says, it's a Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Tzadi Dalet Sivav, a chayla, mispalel afilu shoychev al tzidoi. These days, like that, we have to tell this to people that a person is allowed to daven even lying down. The hu sheyachol lekaven daita, he's allowed to lie down davening. If he has no choice, as long as he can concentrate. Says the Ramah, if he can't daven at all, mamish can't get the words out. Says the Ramah, what should he do? Tells us the answer. Mamish our case. What should he do? He should think the davening. And he brings there base here. He said, "B'shem the psikta." The emphasis is a beautiful psikta. Look inside. The psikta says, brings the pasuk, "Imru bilvavchem al mishkavchem." Says, if you could al mishkavchem, if you're able at least to daven lying down, so then al mishkavchem. If you're noinus and you can't even daven lying down, like our person that he can't be mitzi the words out of his mouth, so then imru bilvavchem, and say it at least in your heart. Shabur brings down, what's halacha l'maisa? Someone that has to daven in this fashion because he's a chayla, like our case, is he yotzei? Shabur brings the machlekes, prichadash, back and forth. Some say it's yotzei, some say it's not yotzei. And the Shabur brings a concept. Rabbi Sai, Sarichin Gadol, we just gave a whole shir. The Shabur told us in Siman Kuf Aleph, the first, that here is lav kediבור dami. If you daven without saying out the words, at least whisper something. You're not yotzei. We saw the Kapachayim, you're not yotzei. Mishabur, you're not yotzei. The Mogen Avram, you're not yotzei. Everybody says you're not yotzei. So what all of a sudden over here, we have a new eitzah. What should you do? If you're chayla rachman al-itzlan, so then you just maharer, and the Mishabur over here brings a machlekes. Over there in Kuf Aleph, the machtos nish visidik. It doesn't bring a ganze machlekes. So you know we asked this kasha, the Prima Godim already asked this kasha. So the Prima Godim tak, it says, Moyer dik chiddush. He says there's a difference between a chayla and not a chayla. What's the difference? If here is lav kediבור dami, so then who cares? If he's a chayla, then yes, it works. And mashenkin, if he's not a chayla, so that says the Prima Godim, because hearer is yes kediבור dami midoraisa. And since here is kediבור dami midoraisa, the Chazal said it doesn't work, midorabanan. In the case of a chayla, they took away their drabanan and they left it on the deraisa that hearer's lav is yes kediבור dami. So Mamela in Kuf Aleph, when you're dealing with a healthy person, it doesn't yotzei at all Shemona Esrei, because midrabanan, unless you take the words and let them out of your mouth, you're not yotzei. Mashayin came for a chayla, our case, hearer is midaraisa kediבור dami, says the Prima Godim, and therefore that's why it helps to daven Shemona Esrei, at least the hearer. The Mogen Avram argues on this. Prima Godim is bringing down the other side, obviously. And the Mogen Avram says that's not the answer. He said the answer is really you're never yotzei unless you at least whisper the words. You're not yotzei. However, over there, what do you want from the guy? He's anyways not being yotzei. So Rebbeinu Shalom will be kaveh schar for the person. You know, it's a gather of Rebbeinu Shalom to see his rotzen that he wants to be maharer, and he's trying to say the Shemona Esrei at least in his late. So the Rebbeinu Shalom will kaveh lo schar as if he's trying. It's my love keilu asoyu, such a type of a gather. Kapanim the Maisa, it seems to be we do have the answer to our shaila, and that's what a person should do in this matziv. What you should tell this person to do is that I guess maybe Rosh Hashanah Zalman Zaitzi should tell him anyways. He should mouth the words, because as you're reading the davening and you mouth the words without being moitzi, because then you're going to lose your vocal cords. But it's going to be a lot easier to concentrate, and you'll actually be mahara the entire Shemona Esrei, and the male you'll do like the Ramah. I wonder deep down if that's what Rav Shlomo Zalman said in the shir. He said that you should be mahara. How do you be mahara? If you're going to mouth the words, so then that's what's going to make the person concentrate on every single word. And the truth is, that's the eighth of the Halakha Ramah. So that's the first halacha, and that's the first shaila. just to to go weiter in the Sif over here, to talk a little bit more about these inyanim, the other inyanim over here, of Dibur, Klapei the halachas of Shemona Esrei. So like we're saying, that a person, taka, when he davens, he has to make sure that he's mashmiel la'oznai. Has to make sure that he's mashmiel la'oznai. We said that the Zohar, there was a tzad that maybe the Zohar means just to whisper the words, and the Mishnah said that's not the correct pshat, and that in a healthy situation, a person's supposed to hear the words of the Shemona Esrei, and other people shouldn't. There is a famous Maisa also in the Alicha Shleima, in Perek Ches over there, very nice Maisa, very interesting Maisa. Kids were kids, Rabbi say, always. And there was a story over there, there was a story over there that there were children, Rav Zalman Meltzer had children in the shul over there, that there was an old man in the shul, and he would say the brachas of the Shemona Esrei out loud, because he didn't realize he was an older person in life. He didn't realize, so he was saying the brachas of the Shemona Esrei out loud. And the Yerushalmi kinder over there, that's how they had fun. They would say Amen to his brachas. He was in the middle of the Shtil Shemona Esrei, the Silent Shemona Esrei, and the kids would stay there and they would say Amen to his brachas to chepper him. Okay, that's not such nice midas. Like I'll go and tell that. But Mrs. Zalman cleared the shaila taka. Should they be saying Amen to the brachas of Shemona Esrei? So he told Shlomo Zalman Orbach, younger Shlomo Zalman, to go and look into the shaila and to come back with the psak. Shlomo Zalman looked into the shaila, came back. It was machlekes a poiskin. And he said that he was machriya. Shlomo Zalman said, he told Rav Zalman that he was machriya, that you should not say Amen. And the Chazal were not misakin Amen b'kai gav, which is a chiddush. Chazal didn't have a separate takana of Amen in each case. They said you have to say Amen on the bracha. So chayra, there's simple chiddush. That's it for Shlomo Zalman. And the truth is that the Shevet HaLevi I saw has a truth about this. He says something else. He says that if someone is saying the bracha of the Shemona Esrei loud enough that you hear him, you shouldn't say Amen. He says, why not to say Amen? Not because they weren't misakin. He says, because he's doing an Isser. He's davening out loud enough that you're hearing him. So if he's davening loud enough that you should hear him, then you shouldn't say Amen, because it's an Amen on an Isser. If that's the reason, Rabbi Isai, so then we could dan. Because many people, Rabbi Isai, davening out loud enough that other people can hear in situations where it's not an Isser. Chavis Yoyer, which was the Makor Chaim, he writes about himself, very interesting, in our Simon, writes about himself that I'm an old man now, and because I'm an old man, I can't hear the davening properly, because I can't hear anyone. So I daven out loud enough that I can hear, and other people hear me. That's how he writes it. There is a mitzias of an older person that has to daven out loud in order that his ears can hear, and he's not doing an avera. You're going to say, but other people are going to hear. That's an Indian api Kabbalah, Rabbi Isai. But to be mashmiel oznai is an Indian api halacha, and halacha beats Kabbalah. So we would tell this kid, if you can't hear Shemona Esrei, you have to daven loud enough, even though the guy next to you is going to hear. Okay, I'm not saying you should bother other people, but you have to figure out have to find a makim kavua far away from other people. But that's the chayr what comes out. But it's a very interesting thing, Rabbi Isai, because we're seeing a case where a person is davening Shemona Esrei loud enough that other people can hear, and he didn't do an Isser. So then I desire, according to the Shevet HaLevi, he would say Amen. And more so, I think you all know there's a famous story of the Chavetz Chaim. It's in the Chavetz Chaim, all the books about the Chavetz Chaim. At the end of the Chavetz Chaim's life, he had the same problem, and that he used to daven out loud. And that's why people know that the Chavetz Chaim, between each bracha and Shemona Esrei, used to concentrate, think about the bracha, which is the eitzah he gives himself in Shem Olam, and also in Chavetz Chaim al Torah, I think in Parshas Eschanan, and he writes over there, a Chassid Echad. We know Chassid Echad means, Rav told us, it means the Chavetz Chaim himself. And Chavetz Chaim at the end of his life, because he was hard of hearing, so they would hear the Chavetz Chaim davening with Shemona Esrei because he davened loud enough that his own ears should hear. He would say the words, and then before each bracha, it would pause and think. So upon him, you see cases of where people have to daven out loud, beheter. So you could say Amen. That's the Chayr. Agav, somebody has to Chavetz Chaim. You write in your own Sefer Mishnah Berurah that you're not supposed to daven out loud that other people can hear. We can hear you. So he said the same thing. I lost my hearing, and the male I have to hear. So what can I do? So beside, I daven out loud so that I can hear, because otherwise it's not going to be Mishmi last night. So a person would be able to say Amen. And I saw this is taka a big nidin in the Achreinim. Lamaisa, the biggest raya Rabbi said you're allowed to say Amen is from the Halachic Kedusha that we were zeicha to talk about in the Yarchei Kallah in Yerushalayim Yarchei, that the minig of the yeshivas, the minig kedoshis, nobody would be mahar on the minig of the yeshivas. And the minig of the yeshivas is that they do Kedusha over here in Yerushalayim, Yarchei now. They're also on my rooftop. I have a rooftop across and a rooftop there. It's very hard to concentrate on rooftops on both sides. So we do Kedusha at mincha time. Not at Shachris, because you have to have Duchening at Yerushalayim, Yarchei, and you have to have Smichas Kula Tefillah. But we all daven together, Kedusha, and I say Amen to the Chazin's bracha. Why? Because when you're davening Shemona Esrei out loud in a situation that you're allowed to daven out loud, you see that obviously you're allowed to say an Amen. Does that stem with Rosh Zalman? I'm not sure, because Rosh Zalman said they weren't misaking Amens on the brachas of a silent Shemona Esrei, Tzarching Sas, but at least Levi the Shevet Levi, you'd be allowed to answer Amen to somebody that's davening out loud, because it's difficult for him and needs to be mashmiel oznan. Which brings us to the last shaila, which is a very geshmaka shaila. It's like a very negeya shaila also. When we say, a nice londish geshmaka shaila for the Talmidei Chachamim over here, when we say that there's a din of mashmiel oznan, that bein in Kriya Shema and bein in brachas and bein in Shemona Esrei, Shulchan Aruch Sinikuf Aleph, Shulchan Aruch Sinikuf Pei in Birchas Hamazon, Shulchan Aruch Sinikuf Beis in Hilchos Kriya Shema. There's a din. You have to mashmiel oznan. There's a din that when you daven, you have to at least hear the words of your own bracha of Kriya Shema Shemona Esrei. So Rabbi say this din is a siman or a sibin. Dainu yesh lachkor Rabbi say. Is it a volume? I'll say it very geshmak Rabbi say. Is it a din in the ears? Or is it a din in the dibur? Is it a volume? Dainu. Chazal said you have to actually hear the words that are coming out of your mouth. I guess because it'll be ma'ori you in kavanah or something like that. You have to actually push it b'poil here. It's a din in my ears. My ears have to hear what I'm davening. Right? It's a siba. Go and hear it. Or no, it's a siman. Azad dibur, that you can't hear it with your ears, is not a proper volume. What's the nafkamina? Sounds like is the bacher under the hat, there's the hat on the bacher. No, it's a real nafkamina, Rabbi say. Let's say I'm on an airplane. So on an airplane, I'm davening. Normally, if I was in this massive, I'd be able to hear what I'm saying. But because of the background noise in the airplane or at a chasana or whatever, one of these situations, I'm not able to hear the words. This morning, I got to have the shiloh because this morning on my rooftop, so that I had the paddle for about a second. I was davening Shemona Esrei, and my Kallus was over my head, and then my Kallus fell off. It didn't fall off the gamri, it fell off on my back. And then I didn't realize it for a few seconds. And then I didn't realize that, when did I realize it? Because I couldn't hear because the wind was blowing in my ears. And I realized I wasn't hearing my own Shemona Esrei, but I was davening at the same volume that a second before I was able to hear that which was going into my ears. So do we say it's a volume? It's a siman. It just means it has to be a certain level of dibur. A dibur that's loud enough that theoretically your ears can hear it, even though in the situation right now you can't. That's enough of a dibur. It's a din in my mouth. Or is it a din in the shmiya? No, you actually have to hear it, which means that a chasana, you got to be davening aloud Shemona Esrei. Or maybe just one davening at the chasana. Or you maybe on an airplane, it would mean you're going to have to, basically davening shachris in the middle of the night, everybody's going to be davening together with you. So what's it? Siman or a siba? So Rabbi say, I must tell you again, in the Sefer Alicha Shleima, he dons this shaila, and there it says a very big chiddush, very big chiddush from Rabbeinu Agadol, Rosh Zalman. It's in Perek Chav Beis in Halacha Ches over there. He's misupik about this shaila. He's not sure. Is it a siman? Is it a siba? Do you actually have to hear the davening? Yes, no. He's misupik. Going to Rosh Zalman. On the bottom, it says, Hoyer Lamaisa, Talmud came to him and said to him, me, do I have to hear it? And Shlomo Zalman said that you don't have to hear it. Okay, so we have the answer. Shlomo Zalman said you don't. It's a volume and you don't have to hear it. Everybody's saying, this is a murder chiddush. Again, in Rishus, there was a story said about Shlomo Zalman and Ma'aser Rav. It's hard to learn from. And it seems to be that the poskim are not like this. First of all, the two stories that you just heard are clearly not like this. The story with the Chavetz Chaim and the story with the Chavetz Yair and the Mekor Chaim are clearly not like this. The Chavetz Chaim, at the end of his life, said, what can I do? I need to be mashmiel oznan because I can't hear. It wasn't like the Chavetz Chaim was saying that I didn't realize, I'm an old man, I didn't realize. Chavetz Chaim said, and the Chavetz Yair said befurish, I need to be mashmiel oznan, and I have to get louder. Why? It's just a volume. Elamai, it's not a volume. You have to actually hear that which you're davening, which is coming out of your mouth. It's a din b'poil that you have to hear it. So you see Bain from the Chavetz Yair, Bain from the story of the Chavetz Chaim, but I said you can't learn from stories. That's the furish that you see you have to actually hear the poil, that what you're saying. So l'chayra, it's not like Rosh Shlomo Zalman, but the Rabbi say there's more rayas. There's a famous Sifsei Chachamim in Parshas Vayera. The Sifsei Chachamim in Parshas Vayera says, why does it say in the Torah Kedosh in Perek Ches Pasuk Ches that Moshe Rabbeinu by Makis Vadeya Vayitzak, he went and he screamed. All the other times it says Vayeta. So others learn, other Mefarshim al Torah say that it says Vayitzak because Moshe Rabbeinu he didn't want people to think that it was with Kishif that he was taking away the Tzvardeya. So he screamed the davening to Hashem. Okay, it's one time. Sifsei Chachamim says a different time. He says because since the Tzvardeya was so loud, the Tzvardeya was so loud, they were so loud that Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't hear the tefillah that was coming out of his mouth to his ears. As a mela, so there's a din of mashmiel ozna, you have to hear what's coming out of your ears. So you see that what? That the poil you actually have to, because Moshe Rabbeinu wouldn't have had to scream. Now Lamai you have to actually hear, says the Sifsei Chachamim. And it's more than just the Sifsei Chachamim. Rabbi say there was a Maisa with the Shvus Yankiv, Rabbi Yaakov Reisher, also the Chayk Yankiv, one of the great poiskim of his time. Taras Shlamim, one of the great poiskim, the Shvus Yankiv. And he has a story over there that there was a Bal Koirei who was hard of hearing. And the Oilam wanted to know by Megillah if the Bal Koirei was Yarchei, if the Oilam was Yarchei, because he can't hear what he's saying. So he writes like this. He writes, the Bal Koirei, you're telling me if you would scream it into his ear, he would hear it, right? So he says, so he's not a cherish. No problem. So he says, yeah, but wait a minute. But what about him himself? So he says, nah, him himself he's Yarchei, because the fact that he wasn't mashmiel la'oznai, that he couldn't hear, so what? That's only a din l'chatchila, bidi eved, you're Yarchei. Wait a minute. Why doesn't he just say that, of course the person is Yarchei, because it's a volume, and you don't actually have to hear what you're saying. It's only a volume. What do you see Mefarshim in the Shvus Yankiv? He doesn't say that. He says the reason why you're Yarchei is because there's a din, mashmiel la'oznai is only a din l'chatchila. It's not b'di'evet, so that's why you're Yarchei. Why doesn't he say better? That it is mashmiel la'oznai, because it's only a value. Mefurish in the Shvus Yankiv, that l'chayra, it's not a value. You're b'poyel have to hear it. And Rabbi I'll tell you a raya in the flow, which will be a simcha rabba v'mechulam. The Sefer Charedim is a sefer on the mitzvahs, and it's broken up, the Sefer Charedim, in a way where each limb of your body has different mitzvahs. Says the Sefer Charedim. What are the mitzvahs of your mouth? What are the mitzvahs of your nose? What are the mitzvahs of your ears? Rabbi say, if you were writing the Sefer Charedim, where would you put the mitzvah of being mashmiya la'oznai when you're davening? So Rabbi say, it's mamash shayla. If you learn it's a din in the dibur, it's a volume, so you would put it with the mitzvahs of the mouth. Where does the Sefer Charedim put it? He says, mitzvah shel. What are the mitzvahs of the oyedim, Rabbi say? The mitzvahs of the oyedim, the mitzvahs of the ears are mashmiya la'oznai. It's a din in the hearing, because you'll have to hear it. So you need to know this halacha l'maisa. The story of Rosh Shlomo Zalman, who knows? Maybe that Talmud came to Rosh Shlomo Zalman, he was a shtickle nudnik, and he was somebody with nervin and who knows what. And if you're going to tell this guy that he has to be mashmiya la'oznai, so then he's going to think he's the chazan for bells on Yom Kippur b'shas ne'iluch name. So then maybe Rosh Shlomo Zalman told this guy, no, by you it's okay. You don't need to be mashmiya la'oznai. It's enough that it came out of your mouth. But halacha l'maisa, it seems to be that from the poskim you do actually have to hear it. Now there is in the chiddush of the Netziv that he brings down from the Shiltis that there's a Shiltis seems to be mechalik between tefillah and Kriya Shema, that by tefillah you don't actually have to hear it mamish, and by Shema you do have to hear it mamish. But akapanim, that's a chiddush, because the Shulchan Aruch brings it down. Bein in Kuf Pei, Bein in Simin Kuf Aleph, Bein in Simin Samach Beis, Bein in Shmon Esrei, Bein by Kriya Shema, Bein by Bechsa Mazon. It does not mechalik. So therefore, halacha l'maisa l'chayra sekum tachoyis Rabbi say that you have to hear the words that come out of your mouth. Let's make a sikum. Our tefillah is shava harbe. The mile of davening in these days is tremendous, and it has the ability to fight against even the midas, even when you're not zeichet the midas harachamim, and certainly to fight against the midas hadin. This person Nebuch that has corona and he's unable to daven the words, we told him the eights of the that he's going to be maharer, that he's going to be mouth the words in order to enable him to be maharer. But he'll just be maharer because what could you do? And the Rebbeinu Shalom will give him schar toiv for his trying. When it comes to being mashmiya la'oznai, so then Rabbi say that does seem to come out, that if you would hear somebody else's davening, it sounds like if he did it because he's an old man, you should say amen. It's not his fault. And do you actually have to detail hear it? It seems to be that the ikar psak halacha is that you do, not to bother somebody else. No matter what. And if you're bothering somebody else, then don't do it in a way anyway somebody else shouldn't hear. But akopanim, it does seem to be that the halacha is that the toil, like the Sitzei Chachamim, like the Chavis Yoyer, like what the Chavetz Chaim story akopanim wasn't like, it says in first in the Sefer Charedim that it's been in the hearing. Right now, Rabbi Isai, Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh, it just hit Rosh Chodesh Iyar. Right now, as we're sitting together, learning together, we're together in Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh, the Shomeya Tefillah, as we're mashmiya our tefillah to the Shomeya Tefillah, you should hear our tefillahs and Yiratzai, Shichadesh Aleinu, Achedesh Azeh, Letoiva, Levracha, Lesasai, Lesimcha, Leshua, Lechamer, Lanu, Lekol Yisrael, Amen ve'Amen.